Hello, welcome to Top Shelf Business and Politics. As you know, on this show, we like to sit down with local politicians, business leaders, and community leaders about Savannah's challenges as well as our triumphs. On this segment, we sit down with our local black bank president, Mr. Bob James, president of Carver State Bank. He's a graduate of Morris Brown College, went on to Harvard Business School, graduated from there, and then became the youngest bank president in Georgia at 24. Amazing story. I want you guys to check it out. Leave some comments, questions if you have them. Let us know what you think.
President of a bank at 24. Were you the youngest of any presidents of any banks in the nation?
Well, the Atlanta Constitution article said that they tried to determine, that whether I was the youngest in the state of Georgia. And so at that time, they kind of concluded that I was the youngest in the state of Georgia. And of course, nobody would keep records of such as that.
I read an article that said there are only 25 black-owned banks left in the United States. What is the situation for black banks here in the United States? What are you guys facing?
The updated figure is probably about 21.
Wow.
Carver is a very unique institution. We are a very unique animal. We are the African-American-owned bank that's in the second of the smaller communities. Most of those other banks, the other 20, are in metropolitan areas. And the fact that Carver survived in a market that is as small as Savannah is a very unique occurrence. The only other one that I can think of that's in a market that might be a little smaller than this is Dansville, Virginia. The challenge that we have is very similar to the challenge that all historically black institutions and historically black businesses have. Number one, most of us grew up out of segregation. In Savannah, for example, there was no bank other than Carver for a long period of time that would lend money to an African American to buy a house in certain neighborhoods, and very few would it lend money to African Americans to buy a house in any neighborhood.
Right.
And there would be very few that would finance an African American owned business or an African American church and so forth. And so segregation created an isolated market for us. So our segment was kind of protected. So during that time, there were 50, 60 African-American owned banks, and some of them would be large and so forth. And so so with desegregation and the changing in the market, and with the larger institutions that were stronger with more capital and so forth, kind of waking up and deciding that, gosh, African American,
it's a lot of money over there.
Yeah, that's a lot of money there, and that they pay their loans back, and the black churches are successful and so forth and that kind of thing. So the market has changed. This tremendous challenge that faces our institutions to develop a strategy to survive and be competitive and to thrive in a different environment. And we have been able to do that to a great extent here at Carver. So we do a lot of things quite differently than other small community banks. It's the same challenge that the historically black colleges are facing and so forth. And then you also have this other problem that plagues our institutions that does not plague other institutions. That's just the racism problem. Right. We are shut out of certain transactions because the developers don't want to deal with anybody who's African American. They don't want us to say no to them. Oh, yes.
Wow. Yeah.
And so there are certain transactions that we don't get a chance to participate in, and that's hopefully that's getting better. But to a great extent, that was for many years that was just the case. And then because of the socioeconomic status of our core market, the African American community, there just wasn't money there.
Right.
So when we get ready to make small business loans, there are no small businesses to lend the money to.
Yeah.
And so that's the challenge. Then there's the training aspect, the management aspect of it. As I indicated to you earlier, it was 1968 before any significant number of African Americans were admitted to the most prestigious business schools for MBA programs and that kind of thing. Your pool of
highly qualified
people was not there. And then the normal pipeline for highly qualified people for a small bank is the large banks. So if I'm looking for a nice person that has some lending experience, you would think that I could go to one of the other larger banks and offer a little bit more and so forth and hire. Well, if the white banks were not hiring African Americans, they were not giving African Americans lending authority. So you couldn't go and find you a person in one of the big banks. The reason I became president of Carver at such an early age is because the directors of this bank, when they got ready to replace the retiring president, they couldn't look around and find anybody who had some real banking experience at some of the other institutions, because at that time they weren't hiring any.
Right.
And when I came to Savannah, the one person who was in the management program at CNS Bank, I hired him and brought him to Carver. And that was a fellow who eventually went to law school, a guy named David Robeson. But that was, that pool of talent in the other banks was just not there.
What did you think? Great interview, right? I'm glad you guys showed up and watched it. Man, it was an experience sitting down with Mr. James and hearing about all the things black banks have gone through, as well as everything they've overcome and what they're able to do right now. So if you have any other questions, comments, leave them in the comment section. We will get to those and get you some answers. Thank you for showing up and viewing with us, and I hope to see you back here soon.